So we're joined by Eric Red, who is the writer and director of the film 100 Feet, or 100 Feet, which stars Famke Janssen, which is being released on DVD 3rd of November. So thanks for joining us, Eric.
Oh, my pleasure. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, I mean, we just wanted to ask you a few questions about the film. First of all, I mean, what is the sort of like the background of the film? I mean, obviously you wrote and directed it. I mean, is there anything sort of behind it that made you particularly wanted to write a film that was a supernatural horror, but also, you know, had sort of like a very strong undertone of domestic violence?
Well, I wanted to do a ghost story. I was a big fan of the J films, The Ring and Ju-On.
Yeah,
and I'm a big fan in general of realistic horror movies. You know, horror films that are set in a very identifiable, believable setting, because I think that the audience just suspends their disbelief a lot more if they believe what they're seeing is going on. So I like that kind of kitchen sink horror style, and I wanted to do a ghost story, kind of an American ghost story in that style. But it took me a long time to come up with an idea for it, you know, to find out. And I kind of got the idea from a very unlikely place. It was when Martha Stewart was under house arrest in the news.
yeah.
I read about Martha Stewart having an ankle bracelet that can only let her go 100 feet. And, you know, I said, I thought that was kind of a cool setup for a horror story. And then the ghost story thing occurred to me. Like, what if this person was under house arrest for somebody, you know, like a spouse that they killed, but the ghost is there, but the person can only go 100 feet. It seemed like a really good setup for a contained horror story, but also one that would be very interesting because it would be one character alone for a great deal of time, and that would be the challenge to keep the complications going. And I wrote the script pretty quick, and it actually got made relatively quickly. So it was a kind of a happy series of events. But yeah, I would say that probably the short version is that 100 Feet is my kind of Ring or Ju-On. I mean, it was my sort of entry in that. And to be honest with you, I have the Korean poster, which is like everything in kind of like Asian letters, and that's perfect. That's like my favorite poster of the movie, and that's the one I have up.
Oh, excellent. Steve?
Yeah, I must admit, when I especially saw the kind of climax to the film, that it was very brutal. It was something that I hadn't seen around the time, other than from sort of like, you know, non-mainstream Hollywood kind of directors.
Mm-hmm.
And I just wondered, did you take any inspiration from like Sam Raimi at all, the way that you kind of brutalize, or did you treat your actors kind of not badly, but did you put them through a lot during the filming?
Are you referring to the ghost kill scene at the
Yes, yeah.
Well, you know, we shot that over a week, and you know, because the effects were so entailed that it took about 6 or 7 hours for each stage. And no, I mean, the shot that's most frightening in that sequence, we used an actual contortionist who was able to separate his limbs. That was
wow.
That was a real person. With some visual effects. So, you know, the sequence was exceedingly graphic and brutal, but was structured in such a way with makeup effects to be that way. The other reason I think that scene has the impact it does is it's the only kill in the movie.
It comes very sort of not unexpected, but you know, it's sort of. I mean, a lot of the beatings of the Marnie character come off camera, or you know, they're in the dark, and then all of a sudden, you know, it's just a big turn in the movie, and that, you know, I was absolutely shocked. I was just like, you know, that was probably one of the most horrifying things I've seen on camera. I mean, you get all like the old, you know, the gore flicks and that, but that was sort of kind of realistic, and it was really cringing because, you know, like the bones cracking and the cracking on the teeth on the was it like the fire mantelpiece?
Yeah, the mantelpiece. Yeah.
Well, I mean, it's motivated. You know, I mean, it's dramatically motivated. I don't want to tell too many kind of plot points of the story in case the audience sees it. But, the ghost has kind of a legitimate grudge against the person that's the subject of his rage.
Yeah.
But I think that because most of the movie is very intentionally a film that deals in suspense and tension and thinking about making the audience think something's going to happen that doesn't, or something it's not going to happen that does. It was much more a film about misdirection and sort of classic suspense. But that one kill was placed late in the movie to kind of surprise people and to come out of left field. And I think it works pretty well.
Yeah, and definitely after that, the pace of the film picks up incredibly. Steve?
Well, yeah, I mean, I must admit that I actually do prefer supernatural horrors. I don't know why, because realistically, supernatural occurrences are kind of just stories, but for some reason they scare me more than just like the random guy in the hockey mask. And so I love watching films like yours for that. But what I do remember most, I remember watching The Hitcher ages ago. And then I've seen Body Parts as well. And I've noticed a pattern that in The Hitcher, the main protagonist is kind of confined within a highway. He's got this highway surrounded by deaths to escape. And in Body Parts, Jeff Fahey can't escape because the arm's attached to him. And in 100 feet, she can't escape because she's confined within 100 feet of the building. Is that something that you thought about while sort of making these films, or?
Well, with The Hitcher, definitely I wanted to play with the idea of making the wide open spaces claustrophobic. It's kind of fun to play with. But I think that, and of course, 100 feet, the physical limitations of house that she's in and how that pits her against this ghost is built into the story. But I mean, I think that's just kind of good suspense. I think, if you break down most horror movies, I mean, good, bad, and indifferent, you basically have a group of people trapped in an isolated setting against a monster. I mean, that's, I think that's just that sort of B-movie kind of base. Is the core of a great many effective science fiction and horror movies, and it's really all about how well you do it, But I mean, you name it, Alien, Jaws, The Exorcist. I mean, all of those have those kind of elements because it's tension.
I mean, one thing that does stand out to me in the film is the location, the building itself. It's just it's got such a unique look to it. I mean, am I right in understanding that it wasn't filmed in the US? You actually filmed it in Hungary, didn't you? The interiors.
It was filmed in both places. The Brooklyn brownstone, the exteriors, the front of the building was filmed in New York City, in Brooklyn, and but I had the actual interior, the whole 3-story interior of the building, of the house built. To specific specifications in Hungary. So that was all on the stage, including the backyard for the final sequence. Because, it had to be a brownstone, I thought, because the movie as a ghost story also kind of, there's something 19th century about ghost stories. And this movie was clearly going to have opportunities to walk around by candelabra light and all of the sort of Henry James kind of elements that I think are wonderfully classical. It was fun to upgrade and do in a kind of a gritty contemporary way, but it had to be a brownstone. But to actually film an entire movie physically in a brownstone, it would have been very boring because they're too small. So I needed to build a set where I could pull all the walls and pull back with the cameras and use long lenses and crane shots and make it really as visually exciting as possible. And I'm glad a lot of people that see the film don't think that the interior, they think we shot the whole thing in the brownstone, which is great.
Okay. Steve?
What was it like, sort of working on kind of on set, but also having to sort of like bring in sort of like the CGI kind of elements, like obviously the ghost at the end covered in, sorry, no spoilers here, but you know, yeah. How come was that demanding as a director to try and sort of like make all that work?
Well, the CGI or the visual effects is actually a very, very small part of that whole ghost effect. I mean, I cast Michael Pare as the ghost, and he was on the set in doing every scene that he's in makeup with this eyeless makeup, and that was his performance, which was like, and this is something actually I think Pare does particularly well. He can act and he can project emotion without a word of dialogue, and you know that's sort of this angry, furious kabuki-like kind of performance he gave is the center of that whole effect. So then later, after we were finished, we looked at it and said, well, we thought we'd add a little bit of CGI to blur it and make him a little more ethereal, but it's still a performance-based effect. I mean, Famke Janssen had an actor to act against and on the set.
Okay, yeah, well, thanks so much, Eric, for joining us. We really appreciate it, and for all those listening in the UK, you can catch 100 Feet on the 3rd of November. Yeah, definitely check that out, and thanks for listening.
Thanks, guys.